Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the panel that we have here with Harry Krishnan. You are here in the correct place if you are here to see Harry's talk. So before we begin, I just wanted to say once again, welcome to this presentation for the Second National Asian Heritage Month Symposium. And before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge that many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcibly brought to the land where we are now. Or maybe you're Indigenous or you're not Indigenous to the territory where you are, like myself. And regardless of where you are, we pay respect and recognize the original custodians of the land where you are sitting. And out of the respect for the rights of Indigenous people, it's our collective responsibility to critically interrogate the colonial histories and the present day's implications of this. So the work that we do on behalf of the Festival Aksayasi is in the perspective or from the perspective of honoring, protecting, and sustaining this land and its people who were first on this territory. So we strive to go beyond just acknowledging the land, and you saw that last night at our talk that we did, as well as this morning, and we're going to continue with that with the First Nations reflections today at 5 p.m. Eastern time, which is every day. We've got those First Nations reflections, and we weave in this Indigenous knowledge to share principles and invite you to move beyond an acknowledgement and into the doing. So as I mentioned, today we've got Harry Krishnan. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Farah Fancy. I'm the project manager for the Symposium project. And Harry is a Bessie, New York City, and Dora, Toronto Award nominee and dance artist, scholar, and teacher. And he's the artistic director of a Toronto-based company called Danse. He's also professor in dance at the Department of Dance in Wellesley University, and he holds a number of accolades beyond that. And Harry is an amazing dance artist and performance artist that I've seen a number of times. So I am very grateful for you to be here, Harry. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you so much, Farah, and it's such a huge honor to be a part of this symposium and to share some thoughts about what diversity means in my own reality as an artist and as a scholar. I have prepared some comments, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I prepared some remarks, and I'll go back and forth between my prepared remarks and a kind of freestyle conversation. But most importantly, the content, the bulk of my presentation will be sharing some videos with you in terms of the range of my work, and that will talk to how I see and will speak to how I see a diversity in really compelling and highly personal ways. My home is in the historic Corktown neighborhood of Toronto on the banks of the Don River, one of Toronto's many rivers and ravines. Those same rivers that give this place its name and that stands on territory traditionally inhabited by many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee and Wendat people, in the original homes of the First Nation, Inuit and Métis people. We all come as settlers and immigrants. There's been both music and dance on the shores of these rivers and lakes for a long time. And today, we have a chance to talk about some of the ways in which dance will continue here into the future. And I'm thankful and I'm grateful to be making art and to be living in this land. It's a pleasure to share some thoughts with you about Canadian dance and diversity through the lens of my choreographic works. I'm going into a screen share mode now. I've titled my presentation, Dancing a New Canada, for a variety of reasons. Why New Canada as opposed to Old Canada? On July 1st, 2020, Canada Day, the Globe and Mail released a video called An Anthem to Canadian Dance, featuring the iconic Leonard Cohen's Anthem. The video showcased a variety of dancers and companies across Canada performing to musical accompaniment by the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and vocals by the Canadian Opera Company. As beautiful as the presentation was, celebrating dance and featuring a few Indigenous amazing artists from Red Sky and some dancers of color. However, the overall presentation was Eurocentric and focused mostly on a Eurocentric dance aesthetic, namely that of ballet. This is certainly not representative of Canada today and its rich diversity. Especially during this time of Black Lives Matter, this was a lost opportunity to honor Black Canadians, and also was a lost opportunity to celebrate many non-Western forms thriving in Canada today. As I thought more about this event, it became clear to me that dancing a new Canada meant honoring and paying tribute to the ideas of social multiplicity, skin color, race, language, class, economic structure. All of these need to be taken into account in thinking about the futures of dance in this country. During this dire time of the corona pandemic, I dedicate my presentation to all the artists who continue to create art and disseminate beauty, despite facing so many difficulties and economic hardships. For this presentation, I'll be sharing with you excerpts of a couple of my choreographic pieces representing my identity as a Singapore-born Indo-Canadian choreographer. My work emerges out of my lived life experiences in Canada over the past 30 years and consistently engage with a variety of themes of multiplicity and radical diversity, which I talked about. My work traverses a diverse range of aesthetics, timelines, and politics, from critical decodings of Indian classical dance, in my case, Bharatanatyam, which is the anchor of my dance practice, to subverting racialized cliches of South Asian dance and of South Asians, to celebrating queer representations of same-sex love, to exploring ideas of cultural appropriation. Huge gamut and huge range of interests I address in my choreography as a dance artist. I'm deeply interested in challenging popular stereotypes and critically dismantling superficial labels such as classical, traditional, and the binary of East and West, through a welcoming, open-ended, and ultimately progressive ways of looking at collaboration and activism. At the end of my presentation, I love to engage with all of you in a much larger conversation about what Canadian dance means in 2020, especially during the COVID pandemic, and how our combined histories can tell new stories, moving us in the direction of a more socially and aesthetically inclusive Canadian arts landscape. So it's this constellation of ideas and exchange of ideas where we move together as a community in complete solidarity with each other, where I find great possibility and transformation and hope. This quote by the famous Chinese dissident artist and activist Ai Weiwei always resonates with me. Everything is art, everything is politics. We indeed live in a highly volatile world, fraught with forms of deep discrimination and inequity. Artists cannot stay silent anymore and must participate in everydayness and politics and social justice. The politics of everyday life and art making intersect, collide in very productive ways in my work. So I address activism in a variety of ways, but primarily as a choreographer. The anchor of my dance practice is Bharatanatyam, the classical dance style from South India. And I'd like to share with you 3 pieces that showcase a diversity of how this form can be presented. The first excerpt is when my company in dance performed in India at the Sangeeta Mahal. Bharatanatyam, like most Indian classical dances, has a rich history, a rich complex history, which I don't want to get into because this is not a class, it's a presentation of my choreography. So I want to give you a visual escapade, visual representations into what my work entails. Suffice to say, Bharatanatyam, the golden age of Bharatanatyam historically was in the royal city of Tanjavur, South India. And hereditary communities, particularly women, courtesan women and male dance masters contributed to the grandeur and to the propagation of Bharatanatyam as we know it now. So coming back to where it used to be performed historically in the 19th century at Sangeeta Mahal was a huge, huge achievement and accomplishment for a Toronto-based Canadian dance company. So I'd like to share with you a little excerpt from our production at the Palace, where we converted this palace into a site-specific event, activity in which, and I'd like you to take notice how we have engaged with the space. So one of the things I'm interested in is the ideas of intimacy and eroticism and sensuality, which is very much the core, historically very much the core of Bharatanatyam. So the idea of metaphor and the idea of non-linear ways of looking at narrative and text is important in my work, as well as activating a kind of dynamic ways of looking at space is also part of my investigation. Great, because I have so many videos to share with you. I'm just going to hasten the process, if that's all right. The King Salon was a piece which was commissioned in 2009 by the Festival of Arts and Literature and presented at the Robert Gill Theatre in Toronto at the University of Toronto. This was a part of my process of how Bharatanatyam can still be dynamic and appealing for a diversity of a cosmopolitan urban audience, at the same time being keeping the integrity of the complex critical history and aesthetic representation it encompasses. So King Salon is part of that endeavor. It was a piece I made for 7 dancers and 5 musicians. And I'm just going to share the last section with you. Bodies are moving in space in really specific ways, using a specific code of gestural movement vocabulary, stemming out of research, documentation, practice, and most importantly, lived life experiences. And I'll talk about that later in my presentation. Nine was a piece I made in 2012. Nine was a double bill along with another piece I made called Quicksand. Nine was an investigation into more popular representations of Indian dance today. So I played with the idea of 9 emotions, 9 staple emotions, very much in circulation in the popular representations of Bharatanatyam today. So I worked with 9 fantastic dancers from downtown Toronto, ethnically diverse, as also in addition to their dance practice. All of them have either worked with me or trained with me in Bharatanatyam, but they come with a variety of different dance experiences, whether it's a contemporary dance experience, or whether it's Japanese Buto, or Japanese classical dance, or Chinese dance, or other forms of Indian classical dance. So I made this work as a kind of representation of what it means to use those 9 emotions popular in Indian dance in really interesting, innovative ways and playing with ideas of asymmetrical use of spacing and the idea of playing with gender fluidity, which is an important component in my choreography. And I will just share a little excerpt with you. So as a complement to Nine, Quicksand was made in 2011. This was a contemporary take on those 9 emotions which you saw. So each dancer you saw in the previous video took on a particular emotion: love, disgust, humor, valor, fear, so on and so forth. So really working with archetypal emotional representation in popular Indian dance. But as a kind of, and this was a kind of preamble to Quicksand, which I made earlier in 2011, where I took the themes of these 9 emotions, 9 Indian classical emotions, and I translated them into 9 contemporary emotions. So working with 9 male dancers from Toronto, contemporary male dancers, and discussing issues of love, compassion, fear, and how they translate into everyday lived life experiences and how they affect my reality and the dance's reality. So the movement vocabulary here, it's not Bharatanatyam, is a contemporary reimagination of Bharatanatyam. You will see that here. In addition to my original ways, I use the body in really innovative, interesting ways to discuss issues of these emotions with much more compelling physicality. So you're going to see a little excerpt of that. And I'm just going to so using props and using the idea of performance art as my entry point in collaboration with movement and physicality. So once again, you can see a diverse cast, a multi-racial cast in my company. So the gestures you saw here are some of the gestures I've used are drawn from my core foundation of Bharatanatyam dance. So they speak to me in really diverse, multiple ways. So the gestures may have specific context in the arena of Indian classical dance in Bharatanatyam as how it's practiced, but then I've recontextualized it and deconstructed it and taken it out of its quote unquote natural habitat to give it a much more cosmopolitan Canadian accessibility in terms of my own reality, working out of downtown Toronto. So how can those same gestures speak in a new language with access, a new language with aesthetic potency and beauty, but a new language which is authentic and meaningful to me as a contemporary Indo-Canadian living in Toronto. So I wanted to use that kind of movement investigation to discuss some of my more contemporary works. The dismantling of South Asian dance ideas through my ethnographic research and deep interest in corporeal dance culture also fuels my interest in the realms of gender and sexuality, post-colonialism, race, and globalization. For example, in 2014, I made this work called Skin. I used techniques and motives such as the economy of choreographic spacing, same-sex partnering to push the boundaries of queer eroticism and to bring questions of race and post-coloniality to bear upon it. It was presented in 2014 originally at Buddies in Bad Times, Canada's premier queer art space as part of World Pride. And since then, the work has gone through several iterations. And this particular section I'm going to share with you is an interracial gay love duet. While researching materials to include in a course which I teach at Wesleyan University entitled Queering the Dancing Body from Multiple Global Perspectives, I accumulated a huge cluster of materials from interaction and movement making with my students that resonated very deeply with me. Queer dance can be a technique for truth-telling and for deep and complex levels of resignification. In this excerpt, you're going to notice how I've abstracted those stylized Bharatanatyam hand gestures, and they have been totally abstracted and imbued with contemporary queer resonance. And I'm going to share a little excerpt with you, inspired in part by the concept of the tango. So it's a queer, diverse, multicultural tango. My personal live life experiences in Canada constantly intersect with my art making. I share with you two pieces now which exemplify this. A piece I made in 2004 called Bollywood Hopscotch, and a piece I made in 2013 called I Cyclops. I was born and raised in multicultural Singapore. My most crucial dance training was in Tanjavur, South India. I went to university in Canada and eventually lived and set up my dance company in dance in Toronto. My life and art are thus rooted in both urban and cosmopolitan identity. Bollywood Hopscotch was a work I created in 2004 at the N-Wave Theatre as part of Toronto's Dance Works main stage season, featuring once again a multiracial cast of 6 dancers with a sound design by Toronto-based composer Debashri Sinha. In many ways, the global eye of most presenters, in my experience, who program South Asian choreographers, still comes with the superficial expectations of work that has to be spectacle, replete with loud music, bright colors, cliche, coquettish dancing. I wanted to create a work that challenged these expectations and at the same time presented a commentary on the constructed dichotomy of classical dance and film dance. So the idea of popular dance and classical dance and that slippery slope, which is very much in circulation in 2020 in South Asian dance, whether in India, whether in South Asia or in the diaspora. Bollywood Hopscotch is a whimsical and subversive take on Bollywood retro culture from 1970s, as seen through the eyes of the reimagined Bollywood diva, who is simultaneously coy, vivacious, shy, tragic, melancholic, romantic, yet eternally happy. These are cliched images in Indian film, in Indian cinema, in South Asian cinema. 6 dances create snapshot vignettes from the diva's many lives. The work is also my personal response to the aesthetic principles of hyper-exaggeration and melodrama, often seen in Indian classical dance today. It is also a comment on the dialectic between today's Indian classical dance and contemporary Indian cinema. I like to discuss ideas of high art and low art. I put that in quotes, and what that means to a larger ethos, a larger global ethos. Canada's brilliant lighting designer, Andrea Lundy, had replicated the idea of hopscotch with her lighting, and Rex's, my costume designer's vision was played on the idea of binaries, with the dancers predominantly black costumes having a splash of color at the back, which became prominent each time they turned, and accentuating the commentary on perceived dichotomy between classical dance and film dance, and the invented nature of the idea of classical in India, more generally, and also in the diaspora. So I'm just going to share a little excerpt with you here. I've got just 2 more pieces, small pieces to share with you. iCyclops is a work I made in 2013 in collaboration with Singapore-based Basker's Arts Academy. And this Canadian-Singaporean collaboration with 10 dancers was a revelation of vivid moments in my own tripolar dystopian universe, mirroring my artistic passage from Singapore to India to Canada, and what that entailed. In my artistic statement, I'd said, I had stolen from my past, raided my present, and borrowed from my future. After years of dealing with cross-cultural experimentation and managing ideas of the sacred and profane in my own personal life, I wanted to create a piece based on the theme of a mythology expressed in popular culture. I was drawn to the idea of the X-Men character Cyclops, hence the title of the piece, iCyclops. I was also inspired by the aesthetics of slash art fantasy, S&M fashion, and superhero culture in North America, and these were the sort of the core underpinnings of the piece. iCyclops took me back to my childhood love of Tamil mythological movies, reading mythological comic books, and later my deep fascination with superhero movie series. It also forced me to confront the deeply problematic faces of I face in society, such as cultural artifacts they project. What does faith mean? What does mythology mean? What does a personal expression of religion means in this kind of fractured, fundamentalist, extremist, volatile world, and asking those larger questions when I was crafting this work. So I'm going to show you a little excerpt. With iCyclops, I was able to continue working on layering different dance vocabularies in relation to each other, creating what I hope is my own personal contemporary vocabulary. Global, it says much about my own Canadian home as it says about my Indian roots. So I'm just going to show you a little promo from here, which you can see the aesthetic I'm going for. This was a multimedia work. Get it? I Cyclops. I. Anyways, one more piece to share with you. Creating social conscious choreographies charged with formal and political meanings represent my artistic response to some of the conservative anxieties around art, race, sexuality, sexual orientation, nationalism, post-colonialism, the immigrant experience, and diasporic cultural identities. All of my works reflect in some way or another this cluster of ideas. Holy Cows is an ensemble work addressing my politics with regards to the hot question of cultural appropriation. The work is based on my life experiences in Canada and the kinds of assumptions and stereotypes people have projected upon me as a person of color and as an Indian dancer. The choreography is a kind of pseudo-autobiographical protest. For example, and I quote, "I don't worship cows and I love burgers and poutine, and that's okay, and I still can be an Indian dancer. I'm more than just an East-West paradigm." So this work recycles worn-out cultural specific taboos, the holy cow, for example, through a globalized physicality. It questions oppressive traditions in a globalized and always already hybrid field of existence. It asks questions about cultural identity while also pointing to systematic forms of exclusion and othering. Holy Cows is a tongue-in-many-cheeks caricature remix. I chose to escape my stereotype straitjacket, allowing me to laugh at myself and my audiences. And laughing at yourself is really, really important, if I can mention that, in this age of bleakness and dire straits. So not taking oneself seriously is really fundamental. And that has been my personal philosophy, both as a human being and as a dance artist. Holy Cows continues to push back against normative assumptions around race and sexuality. With a combination of humor and exuberant queerness, I pick apart stereotypes of experience as a queer Indian immigrant and tear down the artificial East-West binary that shapes many people's worldviews. Even after 30 years and working in Canada, I'm still boxed into annoying, frustrating cliches and sets of artistic expectations unfairly projected upon me. And I think many of you can identify with this, and I love to hear from you and have a conversation about that. Pieces like Holy Cows that speak to a politics or protest are timely, even as they remain deeply personal. In this period of shocking religious nationalism, forms of political authoritarianism, it is time to resist and persist. And works like Holy Cows do some of this work for me. So I'm going to end my presentation with this excerpt.
I love the Indian appearance. It's so exotic. What does it mean? What does it mean? In India, everything means something, right? Right.
And a quick shout out to Neeraj Chagh, amazing UK-based composer who has been composing most of my contemporary works since 2011. Skin, Ice Cyclops, Holy Cow, so all his musical creations. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you for indulging me, and thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you so much, Harry, for that. That was very interesting. And at this point in time, what we'd love to do is open up the floor. In case anybody has any questions, you can drop them into the question and answer box or else into the chat. Harry, I just wanted to mention, though, I love how all of your work combines the intersectionality that we all encompass. And so I just wanted to know if you wanted to speak a little bit more towards that idea of intersectionality.
Sure. The ideas of intersectionality is very nuanced and complex. It's not clear-cut, but it's in the ideas of intersectionality where I find great harmony and solace. So in that messiness of it all, where you are either, in my experience, you're either a Indian classical dancer, whether you're a contemporary choreographer, whether you live in Canada, whether you're dancing with bells on, and whether you're moving, whether you're talking about queer identity. So all these complexities are who I am as a sum total of a human being. So the idea of intersectionality, more than the idea, so intersectionality leads to authenticity. I think it's staying authentic and staying true to yourself as a human being and authentic. You can still be an Indian classical dancer. You can still enjoy a beef burger. You can still be having queer representation of Indian dance. And you can still be a faith-based person. It doesn't have to be this or that. And that's my issue with how binary based we have become as a society and as a community. And for me, that's really frightening. And my art and just being a dancer and using the dancing body at this dire straits, this uncertainty, it's the body which is in the center of this complexity. And it's that same body which can be distressed. It's that same body that can give hope and possibility.
Yes, absolutely.
Have I question? Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, absolutely. It's about that resistance of siloing ourselves and particularly self-identifying as only the most marginalized or underrepresented aspect of ourselves in order for us to gain notoriety. It's that idea of the intersectionality that we identify as an entire human being that includes inside out and 360 degrees around us. So yes, I love that, absolutely. We have a question from the group. It's asking, what do you feel is the biggest challenge or barrier for racialized or marginalized dancers in Canada right now?
I think is first of all, lack of support. I'm not talking about tokenistic support. I'm talking about really holistic, wholesome, genuine support for people of color. And really not supporting diversity as a kind of checkbox. Very often in my line of work, where artists of color, whether you're, if you're practicing a non-European form, are always siloed in a kind of tokenistic manner. And I've always lived my life to question and challenge that. You won't become very popular doing that, but you're really opening new roads for younger generation. How can I be represented in this larger world? So I think it's really important to ask those difficult questions. So ideas of looking past a particular ethnicity or skin color or linguistic divide and really universally supporting artists in terms of if they are excellent or they are not. Are they making work that compels you? Are they making work which is meaningful for them? Are they addressing particular issues which are appealing and compelling and important for them? Or are you supporting them because it's just a politically correct thing to do?
Absolutely.
And I've experienced this all my life, and but also have successful and happy stories. So I cling on to that, and that keeps me going.
Yes, and so for those diffuseurs, so producers who are out there, to really think hard about what it is, the reason why you are engaging these artists and how you want to expand those ideas of being inclusive and equitable in your processes. And also for artists who are out there, we hope that you continue to push those barriers and to not be silent. There's another question here. What advice would be for artists facing these particular barriers? And or to the organization's individual systems creating or upholding these barriers?
I think conversation, I think speaking to, I think really expanding the discourse and really engaging with the artists firsthand and getting into sort of the messiness of what the artist represents and what they're trying to express. And that once again, the support cannot be tokenistic, it has to be empathetic. And empathy is a quality which we are lacking as a society more and more. And I feel that through the arts and through making and being a choreographer myself and this kind of interpersonal ways of engaging with different people, I'm much more interested in exchange of ideas and really discussing ways we can improve humanity.
I think it's also about bringing ourselves forward and making sure that we are individuals and we are visible as an individual. So what would you say that needs to change?
A couple of things needs to change. First of all, first from the economics, we're all going through a difficult time right now. Some provinces have been very fortunate. They've been very supportive of artists of color. Some have not. And I think there has to be a kind of universal ways of supporting artists and not compartmentalizing them and dividing them based on really superficial ways, but really based on the merit of their art. So that's one thing, the idea of funding and financial support. Presenters have to really change ways in which they are dealing. We live in an age of Black Lives Matter now. We live in we live in a time of diverse representation. Where is the representation? How do the audience see themselves on stage? How do the audience see themselves in a variety of different art making spaces? So I think there has to be a really soul-stirring, in-depth conversation with a variety of different presenters and the artists and the community. Audiences need to really be aware of what they are seeing. And I think one of the ways I approach that myself is through outreach and education. Yes, educating the audiences, educating the presenters, and educating each other. I educate myself every day. Every day I don't know. The things I don't know, I learn, I speak, I discuss, and I ask. So don't be afraid to ask questions and speak to the artists and vice versa. So what I'm talking about is a larger, much more outside the box progressive discourse is needed, a multi-pronged approach.
Definitely, and those multifaceted approaches are the ones that are usually more effective. Just very, very briefly, there's a question that's come through. Are there any internal processes that you engage in when your identity, values, and authenticity are questions that leads you to your work as an output?
I think really coming to terms with who you are as authentic selves, and part of that artistic journey is pain and hurt. And not being in a kind of utopian, happy, life is joyous and life is exuberant, it can be that too, but life can be, pardon my word, the S word also. So I think it's really important to stay true and pay attention to one's authentic feelings. And when you're feeling hurt, the most compelling times I am able to make art is when I'm feeling pain and when I'm sad and when I'm distraught and when I'm lonely. So I really use that negative, so-called negative, and turn that, and that can be turned into positives in really beautiful, authentic, transformative ways.
Definitely, and I'll just plug at the moment too that today I'll be giving a talk with him at FinHut directly about that theme and also about being empathetic and how we can support each other in making this type of art. So that will be later on today. There's another question that's coming from the group. speaking on intersectionality, what are your thoughts on contemporary trained dancer, first generation, not trained in classical Indian dance, but who are exploring these forms and using them to inform their own choreographic work? Is this cultural appropriation?
Absolutely not, because it comes from you. It comes from you. So I think it's your practice, it's your personal practice, which is your truth and your authenticity. Look, I work with a variety of different dancers. I work with dancers who are hardcore trained in Indian classical dance, dancers who are not trained in Bharatanatyam at all, but have amazing dance training in, let's say, Western modern dance, or in classical ballet, or in some kind of African dance experience. I think it's really important to look at a kind of global beauty of what the dancing body can have to offer. And using that as a launch pad, and then you can make, I think what's important for me also is your foundation. Dance training is really important, and your practice has to be solid. Your practice can be integrated, your practice can be multifaceted, your practice can be eclectic and hybrid. But the practice has to involve critical rigor, physical practice. Then only with that physical rigor, then you can start to play, and you can start to make much more compelling ways of looking at physicality. Can I just say one more thing, Farah, that's all right?
Yeah, of course.
If you're playing with a particular form, you need to be well versed in that form. How can you break the rules if you don't know what you are breaking? So really, an in-depth, much more substantive investigation in one's practice is critical before you start to engage in intercultural, transcultural, cross-cultural ways of being and discourse.
Absolutely, that profundity of knowledge is absolutely key and critical before you can dig and also deconstruct, because you have to understand what you're doing before you can dismantle. So another question coming from the group, and just briefly because we're almost out of time, what advice do you have for emerging choreographers of South Asian diaspora to break out of the exotic boxes and make work that's more accessible to the cosmopolitan audiences of Toronto or the West in general?
Don't get hung up and cling on to imagine ways of looking at ethnicity and compartmentalizing yourself unfairly. You are who you are, and stay authentic to yourself. And Indian classical dance, I can say this because I'm also a dance scholar and a professor. Indian classical dance as practiced today is reimagined, is reconstructed. So the form is already messed up. So try to look at that as a kind of launch pad, and try to use that to liberate you from these unfair, unnecessary shackles that bring you down in terms of if you are Indian classically dance trained, you only do this. Break the box, break it now, and ask those difficult questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Harry. It was a very, very informative talk, and you expressed a number of things that a lot of us as dancers, choreographers, and cultural workers are always trying to work against and fight. So thank you for articulating that. Thank you to all the participants here. Once again, just to remind you, just because we are working on ways to reconcile, or working on ways for reconciliation. At 5 p.m. today, we do have the First Nations reflections that is happening. And what they've been doing is these elders have been listening to talks throughout the day, and they're going to be giving us their reflections at that time. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you once again to Harry, and we'll see you at the rest of the presentations. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.